we're progressing in a way where it feels safe and it feels okay and you feel competent. It might not be easy and there might be, challenges that come and fear that comes up. But if you actually truly want to like experience a life where you have like vitality and feel fulfilled and you feel peace and you feel calm and you're not anxious and you're not stressed all the time, then you actually do have to acknowledge what's happening in the body. Because when we've learned to like stuff things away or avoid, or we're uncomfortable with emotion because we've been raised in a family that doesn't talk about emotion, then like that's our starting point. And we live in a world that's just very judgmental, and we live in a world that like constantly wants to send the message like you're not good enough. If we're not gentle with ourselves and we continue to beat ourselves up, we just add to the problem. And we don't want to perpetuate cycles of that. We don't want to project our own stuff onto other people. We don't want to feel, totally dysregulated and chaotic in our own lives. And so all of that does essentially come back to us because we're the only ones that have the power to change it. If we took our mental health and looked at it like, well, we're training for a marathon and you're going to have aches and pains and maybe injury, and self-care is going to be super important, but you're going to get to a place where you come through and you feel so good, like so good about what you accomplished or where you are in life or what's possible for you.
Excited to have you here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it in person.
Yeah, you're my first repeat guest, I was just telling you. And yeah, it's just, I'm excited to see you in person. Last time we did virtually. We had a little like pulling back the curtain. We had a little audio issue before, so you've been so patient with me this morning. I really appreciate that. But thanks everybody for joining us again. And welcome back to the show, Katrina Shaw.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's my absolute pleasure. I wanted to start today off, since you've been on the show before, but we didn't really get a chance to like really get to know each other yet. I was thinking we could play a game, 2 truths and a lie. So what do you think about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. You seem nervous about that.
Why is this game so hard? It's so hard.
So you're a registered psychologist, owner of Carbon Psychology. So I feel a little bit empowered. I was able to make the psychologist a little bit nervous. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know if it's that hard with me. I'm kind of by nature a little awkward.
Okay, good. We'll get along well then. Okay, I'll go first, and you can see if you can guess my lie. So, okay, 2 truths and a lie. So, currently learning guitar. My first 2 tattoos were both on the same day, and I have 5 tattoos in total.
Oh, those ones are so hard. I think the lie is that you have 5 tattoos total.
Why do you think that's the lie?
I think it's easy to lie about a number, and like, I kind of feel like you'd be teaching yourself guitar, and I could also see like an impulsive, I'm going to get 2 tattoos on the same day.
Well, you are absolutely bang on. That is the lie. Yeah. Nice. I don't have 5 tattoos. I only have 2. I just recently got them, and yeah, I got them on the same day. Yeah. They're just like little tattoos. So
why'd you get them on the same day?
I had 2 different ideas of what I wanted to do, and when I went to the tattoo artist, I was like, these are my 2 ideas, and he was like, yeah, we could probably just bang both of those out. I was like, okay, let's do it then. So yeah, it was like his choice.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so you guessed mine. Let's see if I can guess yours.
Okay. I have an identical twin sister. I've traveled to over 25 countries, and I've had open heart surgery.
Interesting. Okay, so I know you have an identical twin sister, because you said that when you were on the show last time. So
that was an easy giveaway.
Yeah, so I know that's not the lie. I know you like to travel. I think you like to travel. I'm gonna say open heart surgery is the lie.
Why?
just because I think you travel a lot. I think you like to travel. Yeah. So I would guess that you've gone after that life experience of traveling.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're wrong.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately, the lie is that I've been to over 25 countries. One day.
How many countries have you been to?
Like, I think around, I should calculate it again. I think just under 20. Maybe around 50.
So I should have known, because you said it's easy to lie about numbers.
I know.
I should have caught on to that piece. That's good. So you had open heart surgery. Mm-hmm. Wow. How old were you?
I was 18.
18.
Yeah, it's wild to think back to that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It kind of feels like a dream.
Yeah.
Life is weird that way. Like, things happen and then you look back and you're like, did that really happen?
And like in the moment you think it's like the worst thing. And it's like so traumatizing and stuff. But then you look back and you're like, I even have memories of things that like I'll like try and think back to something and I'm like, I can't remember if that was real now or like it's just like, yeah, memory is a weird thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We store things away.
And like time is a weird thing.
Yeah, it is.
It feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll get into that a little bit more.
Okay.
But I want to do one more. Are you up for one more?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got one more written down here. So, okay. 2 truths and a lie. It took me over 12 years to get my black belt. It's another number one. I was born in Edmonton and I was married at the age of 20. So I'll repeat them for you.
Okay.
It took me over 12 years to get my black belt. I was born in Edmonton and I was married at 20.
I kind of feel like you were married at 20.
You feel like I was?
Yeah. But that would be an easy lie too. Like, age is also an easy lie.
Because I could have been 19, could have been 21.
You could have been like 24. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you were married young, but... And it probably did take you maybe 12 years to get your black belt. That's a lot of work. Okay, I think the lie is that you were married at 20.
You are wrong.
Oh!
Yeah. The lie is that I was born in Edmonton. I was born in Calgary, born and raised. Yeah. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah?
There's very few of us.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's funny because I keep coming across people who are also born in Calgary and we keep saying like, oh, we're a rare breed, but I think we're less and less rare now. Mm-hmm. But did you like leave Calgary and come back? Or have you always stayed? Oh, for school.
Yeah.
So I've always stayed in Calgary. I'm like a homebody.
Really? You're a homebody.
Yeah. I have no life experience. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I was married at 20 and it did take me over 12 years to get my black belt. Yeah.
See, I kind of thought that was true that you were married that young.
Yeah. I just give off that vibe. All right, let's see if I can get your last one.
Okay. I've lived in 20 different houses. I speak 2 languages. I've sailed around Croatia.
I'm just gonna like jump at this one. The first, it just pops out of me. I'm gonna say, wait, repeat them again one more time.
I've lived in 20 different houses. I speak 2 languages. I've sailed around Croatia.
I'm gonna say lived in 20 different houses.
You are wrong.
Oh no.
I have. I don't speak 2 languages.
Okay, that was my number 2 guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a hard game.
You've lived in 20 houses?
I've moved so many times. It's like I kind of have like my body has a response to moving.
That's wild.
Moving sucks. It's the worst.
Like, and were you just like, okay, but you're always in Calgary?
No, like,
okay.
Yeah, like I moved to Phoenix at one point. I moved to Montreal for school. I moved to Lethbridge. Like, there's been school and then life events. You know, I lost my parent. So then you're like renting places and just, yeah, different things. But I've moved too many times in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is like, I'm curious because my wife has also moved around like crazy. Like as a child, like she moved a lot, and I'm curious like what's that like, because I didn't, like I moved like maybe 3 times in like as a child kind of thing, and it was always like hopping neighborhoods basically. It was never like big moves and stuff. So I'm curious what that was like to like never really feel like you were like planted almost, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's like interesting because I luckily didn't move that much as a kid, so I still had the opportunity to like play on my sports teams and have my friends and all that, which I think for those formative years was important. And then as an adult, I mean, there'd be times where I like kind of wouldn't even unpack. Like like there was a little bit of like, I could move again. And so you don't settle in all that much. Like you don't really make it like home. But I had to mentally shift that. I had to get to a place where I was like, no, like even if you're here for 6 months, make it home. Like if you live kind of unsettled all the time, that's worse than just allowing yourself to settle in and then see it as an experience. Like I've had tons of experiences and I've lived in some really cool places, and I just had to kind of embrace it and still allow myself to settle in rather than feeling so uprooted all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Was it always you that was like, for the most part, making that decision to like, oh, okay, I'm done with this place, I'm going to move, or, oh, this opportunity came up, so I'm going to take it and move? Like, is it just in your nature to, I wouldn't say impulsive, but I would say like, just like ready to go after different opportunities and stuff?
I think that's in my nature, but I wouldn't say that the moves were all that. I think it was life circumstance kind of threw me into those things. Like my preference would be to have a place that's like settled and like I'm can be a bit of a homebody as well. But I think I've just learned to lean into life a little bit and like take the opportunities when they come, and when life circumstance happens, you just got to kind of do it. Yeah. You just got to kind of get through it.
Yeah. It's kind of like what we were talking about beforehand, where we were saying how, you know, kind of change is the only constant. And instead of stressing, like I was stressing about the audio and stuff beforehand, it's like, it's just accept the fact that this is what it is right now and kind of make the most of it. And yeah, I think that's a powerful tool to have in life, right? So you mentioned it's like kind of like different as a child and adult. That's kind of where I want to get into now is like as adults and stuff, we do have to take life's situations and the changes that we go through in life and kind of just make the most of this life that we have. It's a difficult thing for a lot of people to do though. Like I think we get so stuck in our emotions, so stuck in our situations, and it's so easy to spiral, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Is that something that you come across a lot of with working with clients in clinic and stuff like that?
I mean, I think private practice is an interesting space because most of the people coming there, they're investing in their well-being. They're investing in like, some people have benefit coverage, not everybody, but so they're coming and they want change. So my clients are definitely people where they're inspiring to me because they want to change, they want to lean into it, they just maybe don't know how. But when I zoom out and look at maybe the general population, I think we're comfortable where we are usually. Like I think human beings tend to stay with what we know, and it takes a lot of courage to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like taking the easier path almost sometimes to just go, yeah, I got shit to deal with, but it's easier just not to deal with it sometimes, right?
Well, and like I think it's kind of like suffering that is easier to cope with than potential suffering that you don't know, right? So to heal and to go through that is not easy. It's going to be hard, and that type of uncertainty, or people don't know what it's going to look like or feel like, and so they just stay with what they do know. It's easier to know, kind of like it's like the devil you do know rather than the devil you don't know. Yeah, I
think that's really powerful. I think that does halt a lot of people from going deeper.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Like the surface level stuff, I'm used to this. Like, my parents didn't treat me good or whatever, and like that's familiar to me. But like going a little level deeper of like, well, what role did I play in that even? Or like that type of digging it's like new pain now that I think it feels a lot like stacking pain sometimes when you're doing that, or you feel like, oh, I'm just going to bring up more pain. And it's hard to kind of see the healing beyond that, maybe.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like I use this metaphor all the time. Like if you wanted to run a marathon, like if we looked at this in physical health versus mental health, it's not going to be easy. Like training on your body to run a marathon is going to be like well, for myself, sufferable. That would be suffering for me to train, to run that long, you know, and your body's going to feel aches and pains and discomfort and potential injury. And you got to nurture yourself and focus on nutrition and hydration and take care of your body, all these things to be able to do that. And so it's like easier for us to talk about it in like a physical way, and it's just kind of normalized, but we don't talk about like, well, if we took our mental health and looked at it like, well, we're training for a marathon and you're going to have aches and pains and maybe injury, and self-care is going to be super important. But you're going to get to a place where you come through and you feel so good, like so good about what you accomplished or where you are in life or what, you know, what's possible for you. But we just don't really look at it that way.
Yeah, it's a great analogy because there's pain on this side and there's pain on this side of training or not training physically, right? It's like,
totally.
Yeah, I got all these aches and pains. I feel like I'm out of shape. Like there's chronic illness and all this stuff that comes along with not eating well, not exercising. But then there's this immediate pain that's associated to actually like, actually I can't eat the things that I love to eat maybe, or I have to eat less of it, or that workout's going to suck and my muscles are going to hurt, or I'm potentially going to bring up an old injury when I'm training, all these like things. But the fact that there's pain on both sides of that is really powerful way to look at it. And mentally too, where we look at that and go, yeah, I'm suffering right now. I'm still dealing with this trauma that I've been dealing with, and going deeper on it's going to bring up new pain on top of this other pain. But yeah, there is relief that can come from that the same way that you would with physical. It's like, well, maybe I won't hurt so much in my body if I get through that initial pain of, you know, the exercise, the workouts, that type of thing. Yeah.
And that's where I think, you know, we have to, I think we have to dig deep within ourselves and figure out like why do we want to do what we want to do? Like what really matters to you as a person? Because for myself, like I know why self-healing is important to me. I know why like constant self-growth is important to me. And that's because like I don't want to find myself in unhealthy relationships. I don't want to not be a good friend or have patterns that show up and I have conflict in friendships. I really want to be like a solid, stable person for the people in my life. I want to be healthy for, you know, when I have a family of my own, all these things. Like I know why I do these things, and it's that drives me. It's not just like aimless. Like I'm not just like, oh, I think I'll like work on myself today, you know? And so I think for anything we're doing in our life that's hard, we have to know why we're doing it.
Yeah. And like I think there are people who like they want to be there, but they're I don't know what it is. It's probably very unique to different individuals, but there's people who are just like so stuck with no, like that's not me, or that's not the type of person that I am, or things that I've heard from people is like, I'm not the type of person who just like does that like self-help stuff, like that kind of thing. Like, I mean, you and I can sit and laugh about it, right? Because like we're both sounds like in that realm of like, yeah, no, I've like got this purpose behind like wanting to grow as a person and everything. But for some people, they just like don't see themselves that way. That's a dangerous thing, I believe, for somebody to just kind of define themselves as, I'm not the type of person. The same way it would be for exercise as well, right? I'm not the type of person who exercises well. There's going to be serious consequences that come along with that, right? What are some of the risks, first of all, for somebody who maybe doesn't want to do that or doesn't feel comfortable doing that type of self-work?
I mean, I think the risks are like pretty known. Like your chances of like if you don't deal with stuff, we know that we have a lot of research and science to support that that's going to manifest somewhere in your body. So you have a higher likelihood of chronic illness in some way or some sort of diagnosis. You have, if you're stressed, you have a higher likelihood of really any illness. I mean, these are kind of like fundamental principles of well-being. Yeah. And then, all the other aspects of life where everything suffers, does like do your relationships suffer? Does your intimate life suffer? Does your friendship suffer? Does your social life suffer? Does your career and work relationships suffer? Do your goals suffer? all of it, really. I mean, it plays into all of it if we're not mentally well. Like if we,
Yeah.
and I'm not even talking about like severe mental illness, right? Like there's sort of mental illness where you might, need a lot more support, but just like mental wellness as a whole. And I mean, I can speak to that, right? Like when I haven't taken care of myself and I'm not in a good mood, even, like that affects everything. Like if I'm stressed out and not sleeping and I'm more anxious and I have more of a temper, or I'm short with people, or people like make me angry on the street for literally doing nothing, that type of energy and stress and overwhelm affects every part of your life. And so,
it's good, first of all, to hear like that a psychologist even like struggles with these types of things, right? It's like, we also get angry in traffic. We also snap at people sometimes, right? I think that's important for people, because I think the people who are on the outside looking in, like, I'm not that type of person. It's like, we're all that type of person. Like, we all have these kind of same struggles and stuff like that. But something that's really interesting listening to you is a lot of like, it affects the relationships. It affects, your work life. It affects like the people around you, the people who are closest to you. And for me, that's something that I've really realized as an adult is when I'm not taking care of myself, or when I see other people who are not doing that self-work, like if you're not taking the responsibility for your shit and like the stuff that's like hurting you and the traumas that you're holding on to and the problems that you have, like if you're not trying to figure out like how you become better from it or your role in that thing, eventually it will impact the people around you, and like it could really hurt the people that are around you, the people that like you love the most too.
Well, and I think, you brought up personal responsibility, which I think is a really good point. But the other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is that humans love to believe we have control. We have this idea of like we can control certain aspects of our lives, and we can convince ourselves really of like kind of any truth. Our brains are very powerful. And I think the thing that people believe is like, oh, well, I can control it in my like friendships and my intimate relationship, and like I don't project my stress there, or it doesn't come out, or I'm like very good with my kids, and people believe that they can sort of like compartmentalize the stress or overwhelm or their issues. They can just put it into a box and it's not going to affect them. But that is impossible. It is absolutely impossible to control all the aspects of our lives if we haven't dealt with what's inside. And like, kids are intuitive little beings. They pick up on way more than we could ever know. And so like we do have to kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and recognize like we don't have that much control. Like our stuff is going to seep out in some way, whether we want it to or not. And it's going to come out at times that like we didn't necessarily expect or anticipate or want it to come out. And we don't actually have that much control over our stuff. It's an illusion of control. Like it's like a belief that we've compartmentalized it, but it's still there. It still has an impact.
So what do you think the difference is between like feeling like you have control over that thing and taking ownership over that thing, right? Because there's like, let's say something happens to you, like somebody says something that's rude and it sets you off, or there's just like a negative relationship in your life. And it's like, God, this person's so rude to me all the time. Like maybe it's your boss and they're so rude to me all the time. They're treating me this way, blah, blah, blah. It's like controlling that, it sounds like to me, and maybe I'm trying to answer my own question, but it sounds like to me, it's like controlling that is like feeling like you have control. I go home and I'm just going to like shut it out. Like that happened at work. I'm just going to try and shut it out. Blah, blah, blah. Taking ownership of it would be like, well, what impact did I have on that today? And how can I use that? Or how can that self-exploration and self-learning, how does that impact me then when I do go home? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. No, it makes sense because it's kind of like, do I just stuff it down and pretend it's not there? Or do I actually figure out how did this affect me and like work through it in the moment, which actually does make sense what you're saying. And I think it comes to a key piece of like a key, would it be a skill? I don't even know if it's a skill. Maybe it's partly a skill, but I think self-regulation and like regulation of our body and emotions and our nervous system is maybe the fundamental skill that like we've missed in life, or like the foundations of everything that we haven't been taught this in life. And the more that I learn and the more that, you know, I study and do trainings and things like that, I've come to learn like that's the fundamental piece of everything, because we can't go through life without stress. There's loss, there's grief, there's all kinds of things. We're going to be affected by life. We're not in a utopia. We're not like, you know, not everything's going to be la-di-da bliss and all that stuff. But if we're not able to understand how those things affect us and work through them in the moment so that we can move through them in a productive, healthy way, then we can't maintain, you know, a sense of like groundedness and a sense of like calm in our bodies and a sense of stability within ourselves. And that's where things are going to manifest, because we sort of grew up, well, like my generation and older definitely grew up, you know, where we didn't talk so much about emotions and we didn't really deal with these things. It was kind of just like, well, stuff that away and move forward in your life, sweep things under the rug. But now we know, like, we can't do that. That's going to affect you. And so learning how things affect your body is so key. And like, that's, if I had to say there's one thing to focus on or work on, is like knowing how things affect us. And like in a subtle way, like, you know, if somebody pisses me off in traffic or whatever, it's not like, oh, well, that person sucked and I'm going to point the finger at them and they were driving 20 under the speed limit, so like that's why I'm mad. It's turning the mirror on ourselves and being like, okay, sure, that person's driving 20 under the speed limit, but like, what's actually going on for me? Why am I so angry? And is it because I started my morning flustered and then I was late and then I poured my coffee all over myself, so then that set me off even more, and then now here I am, I'm worried that I'm not going to make it on time to my doctor's appointment, and last time my doctor said they wouldn't see me because, you know, I was 20 minutes late. And so really, I'm overwhelmed, but it's so much easier for me to like target rage at this person going 20 under the speed limit. And so that's like a process that I always engage in, is like, anytime I'm freaking out about anything, I'm always like, okay, Katrina, what's really going on here? Yeah. And, you know, usually it's my own, like, I'm insecure, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm like tired and just burnt out a little bit. Like, and then I use that as just like a sign of like, okay, well, I probably gotta like chill tonight, or like take some time, or like regulate myself, do something to like get myself back into a better space. Because if I just stuff that away, then the next thing is going to overwhelm me even more. And then the next thing and the next thing. And then I'm just going to like lose it on somebody because I didn't actually deal with it. So it's like knowing what's actually happening for us. And that's usually not at all what we think is the real emotion.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it sounds a lot like deflecting.
Yeah.
Right. And what comes to my mind from what we were talking about before is somebody who's doing that quite frequently in their life, they're probably deflecting towards the people who are closest to them. Right. So it's like you have that day, and then you go home to your spouse, and then you have like dinner with your family member or something like that. And that stress that you've been feeling all day, you don't want to feel it anymore. You don't want to deal with it anymore. And if you haven't taken that time to like self-regulate and have that self-awareness of like, what is this, like, why is this really, or is it just like everybody's against me kind of thing, then it's super easy to start to turn that on to the people who are closest to you. People be like, what's wrong with you today? It's like, nothing's wrong with me, something's wrong with you, like that kind of thing, right? And you start like, and you know, it can get to a point where it does start to cause a lot of pain for the people around you, because now people start to feel shut out, or people start to feel like they're attacked around you, and it really had nothing to do with those people that are in your life.
For sure. Yeah, that happens all the time, right?
It's a scary thing when you think about it. It's like when you think about it in that way, there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to actually do that kind of work. Yeah. I mean, yeah, unfortunately there are very difficult people in life. That's real. You know, there are abusers, there's, you know, challenging people, there's unhealthy relationships, there's all that. And so like, that's very true. That's not to like dismiss any of the stuff that has gone on for people. And at the end of the day, you know, we can only control us. And so
we don't want to perpetuate cycles of that. We don't want to project our own stuff onto other people. We don't want to feel, totally dysregulated and chaotic in our own lives. And so all of that does essentially come back to us because we're the only ones that have the power to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like self-awareness is a big part of that, of just being self-aware in that moment, even of you're in traffic and you snap and it's like, is it really about that person? Like, do I really need to tailgate them now? Or is this about, something bigger?
Totally. Yeah. Self-awareness, I think, is the starting point of everything. Like, if we don't have awareness of ourselves and what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're thinking, our patterns. I mean, if we don't have awareness of ourselves, then we can't really move ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is something that kind of halts people from taking that self-awareness, is it like the fear of judgment, do you think? Is it like shameful feelings of like, wow, why am I so angry all the time? Like, what do you think it is that for most people that kind of halts them from even taking that step of self-awareness?
Yeah, I would say probably shame would be at the core of that. Even myself, I look at my own process of everything that I faced in my own life and healing, and I think shame was at the core of it. And it can be easy to again like be like, well, no, I don't feel feelings of shame. That's not it. But like, if you're truly honest with yourself, yeah, it's a feeling of like, how could I be the problem? Like, and when we look at guilt and shame, for anyone that doesn't know, but like guilt is like I did a bad thing, and shame is like I am bad. And so when we have to look at ourselves and we're like, I'm the problem, or I'm bad, or I caused this, or, it's bound to bring up shame in pretty much any of us to face that stuff. And so, people don't want to feel that. We don't want to like look in the mirror and be like, oh, maybe I was the problem here, and maybe I contributed to the problem. And, now I have to face those feelings of what that feels like, to acknowledge that I didn't behave in ways that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to just kind of avoid it or act like it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame is a powerful thing, right? And I think guilt and shame can get very like crossed up in your mind too. Where it's like you feel guilty about something that you did. It's very easy to feel like shameful about it. But that's the kind of the differentiator that I've heard as well, is like, with shame, you're like identifying yourself as being bad because of it. Whereas with guilt, you're like, I did a bad thing and I feel bad about it or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I shouldn't have flipped that guy off in traffic. But shame would be like, I'm a bad person for flipping that guy off in traffic.
Yeah.
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 With shame, I want to stay on shame for a bit because I think it's a really important thing. I think it's something that everybody deals with. We all have shame for different things in our life.
Yeah.
How do we start to kind of get past that?
I think a lot of self-compassion is needed because how do I want to communicate this? We live in a world that's just very judgmental, and we live in a world that like constantly wants to send the message like you're not good enough. We're inundated with that on social media and in the news and all this stuff. It's like, if you don't have a certain body type, or if you're not, this successful, or you don't make this amount of money, or you like all of our messages are like, you're not good enough in some way. Right. And so like the last thing we want to do is like face another thing and how we're maybe like not good enough, or we're bad, we'll use the word bad for the language of shame, that we're bad in some way. And so we don't want to feel that. We're trying to always escape that, which is why we get caught up in all this stuff of trying to be, look different ways, or whatever it is, chase ideas of what we should or shouldn't be in this world. And so I think a lot of self-compassion, because if we're not gentle with ourselves and we continue to beat ourselves up, we just add to the problem. And so if, I use this a lot in my therapy, is that like the brain doesn't know the difference between imagined and real. And so if you were sitting here and you were like telling me how much I'm a piece of shit and I'm fat and I'm like ugly and all this stuff, people would be like, that's abusive. Kyle, you're abusive. But if I'm in my own head and I'm like, you're a piece of shit and you're fat and you're blah, 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 we just don't really say anything about it.
People think that's normal.
It's like, and we all do that, but it's so detrimental to our well-being, because it's like living with an abuser. It's like you're always in an experience of abuse. And so if we are facing shame, and then what we do is like we make the shame worse by being like, see, you are a piece of shit and no one likes you and you're a bad person. If we fuel that, we don't get anywhere with the shame. Like we don't get anywhere by taking that responsibility, looking in the mirror, facing some of the stuff that we have to change. We just make it worse. And so if we have to have compassion as like the antidote to shame, because we have to be able to be like, and this is the thing I use all the time with myself, is like, I'm not proud of this thing that I did. And I'm like taking the steps to make sure I don't ever do it again. And that's like the part where I'm like, I'm a human. We've all done that. And at least I'm choosing the path to change it and to be better and to always learn from it, rather than taking the path where I'm just going to stuff it away and pretend it's not there and it's still going to be there. And so like, that is how I'm gentle with myself, is like, this is so painful to look at and so painful to acknowledge, but I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to tell myself I'm terrible. I'm just going to acknowledge that like, at least I'm doing something to change it. And that gentleness is how we make it through, because if we continue to beat ourselves up, like, we just make the shame worse.
Yeah. And you kind of almost answered the next question that I was thinking, which is like, you said something about like, but I'm doing something to change it. And because I think that there's a balance as well. And it's a tricky and delicate balance between like self-compassion and like moving past something or like getting through something. Because I've found this with myself, even in times of feeling shame and just like feeling down and those types of things, is like self-compassion. You can also get stuck in that a little bit. Is like, not to say that self-compassion is a negative thing in any way, but you can get stuck in this like almost like depressed, like feeling sorry for myself kind of state as well, where it's like, but I think what you said, like, but doing something, like be self-compassionate and then take action on it. It's like, yeah, I'm only human, and so what can I do to grow from this? Like having like a growth mindset almost around it.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. And like the interesting thing about shame is like, maybe I can put this in an example, is like, let's say I feel shame for something I did, and people could probably like relate to something like this. Like, I feel so ashamed, and all I want is that it never comes out. Like, think about it, like you were in high school and you did something and you were like, you're on edge and you're stressed out and you're like, I don't want anyone to know this happened. I hope no one talks about it. Like, there's an aspect of hiding in like, I don't ever want to be exposed. And that is shame. Like, it doesn't want to be exposed. It wants to like hide itself away, and we don't want anyone to discover that like we're bad, like in any way, or that we've done something that like makes us a bad person. We want to like hide. Shame wants to hide. And then we want to like cope with all these other ways of making ourselves seem so great. So like, we're going to, overcompensate in ways of like, oh, I like, want to make myself look the prettiest, or I want to make myself appear like I'm the nicest person on the planet, or I want to make myself like, I want to like win people's validation because of my nice cars that I have, or whatever the thing is that we attach to. All kinds of things, we see it everywhere, and we all do this. So like, I don't want people to feel shamed for doing this, because I've also done it. But we then create this illusion of like who we are, right? And we're trying to hide from the shame. And so the healing to shame is to be able to witness it, like to be able to see it and be able to like not hide it. And so sometimes in the therapeutic relationship, the reason that therapy can be really powerful when working through shame is that somebody else gets to see it. Somebody else gets to like hold it, talk about it, and reflect to you like, you're still a worthy person. You're still very valuable. We've all probably done something along, some similar lines where we've hurt someone or done something we're not proud of, or like, we're humans. We've all done that. And then that can be very healing in helping people to like, be like, okay, like I can be gentler with myself. And now I want to take the responsibility and take action to move forward. But it can be really hard to move through shame when we're just by ourselves, like in the dark, and it's hiding. And, sometimes we just have to have somebody else hold it with us and be like, you're okay. Yeah. I got you.
Is that an important aspect of therapy too? Is that it's like somebody who's kind of outside of your world in a sense, where, because I imagine, and I know for myself too, like I've gone to therapy and stuff like that, and it's super helpful to just talk about some of the thoughts that you're having, right? That you don't want to share with even the people who, maybe especially the people who are closest to you in your life, but to have that outside person who's, is kind of, you almost have this like safety buffer of like, I know they can't be judgmental of me because it's unethical, right? But to even just like have that safety buffer of like, this person doesn't actually know the people in my life, they don't know what's actually going on and stuff like that, but just to talk about it, just to let it out, like you said, shine some light on it and have somebody else hold on to this for a minute, right?
Totally. And I mean, you just said something really important where you're like, well, I like don't want to talk about it with anybody in my life. That's a key point of like, if we, from a self-awareness standpoint, if like we pause and we just ask ourselves the question, like, why? What are you so afraid of? Like, what's the worst thing if you told your wife that? And like somebody would probably be like, well, like, I'm afraid she would judge me. Okay, so if she judged you, what would you be worried that she would think about you? Like, well, that I'm like not good enough. So you can see shame right there. Like there's whatever the feeling is. And so we have to sometimes stop and be like, okay, well, yeah, so there's those feelings that exist there. And then the therapeutic relationship is where it can be someone that like you build some trust with and doesn't have any connection to you in your personal life, where you can finally just like say it and work through those feelings of shame. Be like, okay, I actually shared this with somebody and I'm okay. And like, I wasn't judged. And that's where healing starts to occur. That's where we start to experience ourselves differently in the world.
Yeah. And very interesting too, because I think that's where somebody who's on the other side of it can play a really crucial role in allowing somebody to be vulnerable about something that they're feeling shameful about or something like that. Is like, if you want to build that trust and vulnerability as well, you have to do your job of being that kind of person who's, even if you are judging them for something, right? Even if they tell you something and you're like, man, that is horrible that you did that or something, right? Then to be on that other side and be like, hey, like, it doesn't change the way I think about you. Like I still love you, or you're human, and like having that kind of response for people, I think it's really important. It's something that I've learned being married for, many years now, is like, you kind of have to learn to separate those types of things as well, even if it's something that's, very minor, but they're feeling shameful about it, right? Maybe they feel shame about their body or something. It's like, no, like, I don't care like what you look like those kind of things, right? Yeah.
Well, and like that's an important point, is that we can't intellectually get there. So like, let's say your partner, my partner, anyone was like, oh, I feel shame about my body or not good in my skin. And you're like, but babe, you're beautiful. Like, I love you. And that's genuine and honest for you. But that intellect, like getting there in your head, doesn't change anything for them, right? Like they have to feel what is in their bodies. They have to feel the emotion to move through it. You can't just convince somebody of that truth. You can't just be like, but you're worthy. And then they're like, yeah, I believe that, right? They have to like feel the feelings of shame. They have to experience that emotionally in order for it to shift. Because as powerful as our heads are at rationalizing anything, we can't rationalize our way out of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what is like, it sounds very similar to like almost like an addict. Is like, they're not going to change until they're ready to accept that, and until they're ready to change, right? It's like, you can tell them that you're there for them all you want and stuff like that, but until they're ready to have you there for them, they're not going to make that change. It sounds very similar here when you're dealing with like deep levels of shame, or even like surface levels of shame and stuff like that. How does somebody get to that place where they do start to feel those emotions, and they do start to have a level of, awareness that, okay, I am experiencing shame, and I do need to start to regulate these emotions and work through these things?
Yeah, and so it takes a lot. I mean, even admitting that we feel shame could be considered advanced. Like that, that even like, you're not just going to look in the mirror necessarily out of the blue and be like, oh, I feel shame, right? So I think it's starting on a simpler level, a less threatening level. Like shame is like the deepest human emotion to face, or the most challenging human emotion to face. So that's not going to be necessarily our entry point. And I like to use like a metaphor for my clients. Like I'm not here to like just shove you in the deep end and be like, face all your things, we're digging up every dead body in the graveyard. And like, no, like we're not doing that. We're, we're on the edge of the pool and we're like dipping one toe in and like testing the water. And then we're, putting on some water wings, and then we're going in the shallow end, and then we're like learning how to kick our arms and our feet, and then we might like we're progressing in a way where it feels safe and it feels okay and you feel competent. It might not be easy, and there might be challenges that come and fear that comes up, but we're definitely getting you to the point where you can swim in the deep end. We're not just like throwing you in there. So it can be really slow at first, and sometimes that is like one, just building safety and trust with my client can be the starting point, because like if they don't trust me or they don't feel safe there, again, like I know we're not going to get very far, because we can't do anything if we don't feel safe with someone. Yeah. And then it might be like, okay, what we're learning is like how to like reconnect to the body, because when we've learned to like stuff things away or avoid, or we're uncomfortable with emotion because we've been raised in a family that doesn't talk about emotion, then like that's our starting point. And so some of it might be like just learning to reconnect to our body and emotional awareness. And how that could look would be sometimes doing like a body scan in session, like teaching people to be more comfortable with what are like the sensations I feel. If I feel anxious, how do I feel it? Where is it in my body? That alone is like building a skill of self-awareness and reconnecting ourselves to like the emotional somatic body. Mm-hmm. And then it might be like, okay, now we want to like practice labeling emotions. Like we're kind of raised in a society that's like, I'm good, I'm happy, things are fine. We don't, do we know the difference between like anger and frustration? Do we know the difference between like sadness and overwhelm? I mean, a lot of people might not actually know the difference in how we feel those things. And so starting to name and label emotion is a really powerful way to start to build your emotional awareness and understanding of what's happening for you. So I often tell people, like, in your life, ask yourself on a repeated, throughout the day, like, what are you feeling? Like, so, if you're in the car and you're angry, label it like, I'm angry. And if you're like, and then you can like deepen that and be like, am I really angry? Or like, do I feel overwhelmed? Yeah, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, is there anything else there? Am I feeling anything else? Like, and actually putting words to it and saying it to yourself and building out your understanding, rather than we just stop at, well, like, I'm angry in traffic and, screw that guy kind of thing, right? So and we're very stunted there. We stop there and then we move away from emotion. But to like sit in it and be like, oh, I actually like am overwhelmed. We actually allow ourselves to get to the true emotion rather than just stunting ourselves.
And what's the significance of that? Because I imagine there's people who are very closed off who might be listening to this and they're like, yeah, that's great, but like whether I label the emotion or not, it still sucks to feel it. So I may as well just say like, yeah, this feeling sucks and I'm just going to try and move past it as quick as possible so I don't have to feel it anymore. Like, what's the significance to like recognizing the difference between anger and frustration, but then also like sitting with it?
Mm-hmm. Because, well, one, so I'm trying to think of like a good metaphor of how I could like make sense of this. The science of emotions is like, you have to feel it to heal it. A lot of people don't like that. We don't want to feel. I get it. Although I'm a feeler, so I don't really get it. But we have to feel it to heal it. And then people are like, well, that's in the past. Like, I'm over that. Like, that happened when I was a baby and I don't even remember it.
I don't want to dwell.
Yeah, like whatever. I've moved on. And well, there's some truth in that. And like intellectually, the body remembers it differently. And so, again, we can live in this world completely fine, like going through with our head and being logical and rational and successful and all the things. But if you actually truly want to like experience a life where you have like vitality and, you know, feel fulfilled and you feel peace and you feel calm and you're not anxious and you're not stressed all the time, then you actually do have to acknowledge what's happening in the body. And unfortunately, then you do have to feel some things. And again, we don't have to dig up every dead body in the graveyard. Like, we don't have to go to every traumatic thing that happened in your past, but we do have to acknowledge at least that they've had an impact on who we are, how we cope, how our nervous system experiences the world. And so those things do matter. And if we just bypass emotion all the time, we are stuffing it away. We have to feel it for it to pass. And so it's one of those things that, like, this doesn't mean you have to have a meltdown in the boardroom at work because an emotion came up and you got to like cry. Like, that's not what that means. It doesn't mean that we're like wanting everyone to just break down and cry all the time. What it means is like acknowledging that there's an emotion there. And so sometimes it's like, if you had a totally stressful day and some guy like ripped you apart in the boardroom and like you felt something. There's no way you didn't feel something, even if your head was like, I'm good. Like, I don't care about that guy. If you could like get home, have a hot shower, and for a moment acknowledge, how did I feel? What do I feel when I like replay in my mind what happened today? When I just sit with this experience for a moment of like some guy tearing me apart in a boardroom, you might feel like some fear. You might feel, you know, embarrassed. You might feel some shame. You might feel angry. You might feel like all kinds of things. And so it's just like being able to sit for a moment and acknowledge like, holy, I actually like felt really afraid, and like I can feel that in my body right now, like as I'm like replaying it in my head. And like, so what do I need to do? Like, how do I feel grounded? Like I feel this in my body. And then you spend 5 minutes in the shower, you take some deep breaths, you acknowledge the fear, you felt the fear, you kind of allowed yourself to like move through it. It doesn't have to be this like grand thing. It's just, if you bypass that, well, your body has that imprint. So you have a lifetime of imprints. But
yeah, it sounds a lot like just taking control by calling things out.
Yeah.
And this is something that's really helped me with anxiety in my life, where it's, you know, it would be very like, you'd start to like feel a sensation of your anxiety, and then it's like you like latch onto that, or your anxiety latches onto that, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling stressed because like my heart rate's increasing, right? And it's like, what does this mean? And then you get anxious about that, and then you feel this other sensation. It's like, oh, now I got this like pain, right? And it's like, and all these different, it would latch onto it. Whereas like when you could just like call it out, it's like, oh, I'm feeling like my heart rate's starting to increase, like I'm feeling that feeling in my chest again. Oh, that must be anxiety. That's probably just my anxiety coming in. I don't have to worry about it. It's just anxiety. It's going to come. It's going to go, right? It sounds a little bit like that with emotions too, where it's like, oh, I'm feeling very hurt right now by the way that person spoke to me. It's like, by like calling that out, you take a little bit more control over the emotion and give it a little bit less power.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're describing is like the sensations in your body. It's you know, there's sensation and emotion and feelings. The sensation of anxiety is really uncomfortable to people. And the sensation that comes with certain emotions, like sadness, you know, you're going to have like, people are going to describe these things relatively the same, not always, but like, you know, a deep ache or like a heaviness or like and so the sensations that come with those feelings, often people don't want to feel those. And especially anxiety. Anxiety is like all, you know, it's so uncomfortable and you just like basically want to like crawl out of your skin. That's where we want to like, we go into that distraction of like, well, I'm going to like self-medicate, or I'm going to, you know, watch porn, or I'm going to, you know, get on the dating apps and swipe, or I'm going to whatever, go for a 4-hour run, or whatever we're going to do to escape and chase that dopamine. We're just trying to get away from the sensation. And so learning to like be comfortable with discomfort is another like powerful skill, which is why I think a lot of people are on this like trend of, you know, cold water and controlling their nervous system with ice baths and things like that, because it's controlled stress, but you learn to regulate your body. So like the discomfort of being in cold, you're learning to like bring your breath down and regulate the body and find calm and peace in that. And so it's a very controlled way to like train your nervous system to come down. We don't really do that with anxiety.
Isn't it funny how we always like take the extreme? Where it's like you could meditate and it kind of does a similar thing, but no, let's sit like we're gonna
Let's
sit
blast you with ice.
Yeah. It's
Let's
so funny how
physically suffer our way through ice rather
I'm,
than just slowing our mind.
If I'm gonna suffer, I'm gonna suffer. Yeah. No, I think it's really important. It's just the level of, it sounds like, awareness, first of all, of emotions, whether they be, if we want to call them minor emotions, like maybe feeling like a little bit sad or a little bit angry, or maybe it's a deeper emotion, like feeling very anxious or feeling very shameful, those types of things. Like awareness of what am I feeling, and then acceptance of, these feelings are normal feelings that everybody has. It doesn't make me bad. It doesn't make me, I don't have to feel shame about feeling shame or like any of those types of things. It sounds like that's kind of a good starting point for people.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think even just acknowledging like we're emotional beings by nature, we got to give some space to them. Like we can't stay in our heads forever, because if a snake came right now, my body's going to respond far quicker than my head. Like my head's not going to be like, oh, there's a snake, I should get up and I should run. My body's just running. I'm just going before I can even process it. And then after, my head's like, what was that? So we have to acknowledge that like our bodies are responding far quicker than our heads. And we have to give space to that. Like we are emotional creatures by nature.
Yeah. And give space to it. And then it also, another thing that we touched on, I just want to reiterate again, is like that responsibility to do something with it, right? It's like you don't have to like fix it like right away or anything like that. And like you said, you don't have to go to therapy and jump in like 2 feet and like, here's all my problems from my childhood and stuff like that. But it's like there is a responsibility for the people that you love in your life, I think, too, to take care of yourself, right? The same way that like if you have kids, like you want to take care of yourself so that you can live a long life with your kids. It's the same thing emotionally. Like I want to take care of myself mentally and emotionally as well, so that I'm not snapping at my kids as much, and so that I'm not, so that I can be the best dad that I can be for them, or the best husband that I can be for my wife, and those types of things. Like there's a responsibility for, whether if you don't want to deal with it yourself, like there's a responsibility for the people that are around you as well. Not to put more pressure on people, but I think there is, right? I feel that pressure in my life.
Yeah, and maybe it's just a like gentle reframe. Like and I don't know, maybe it's unfair for me to say this, but because I'm sure I felt pressure at one point too. But I think too, it's just like, rather than seeing it as like this like daunting mountain that we can never get through, it's like slowly working at things, right? Like it's just learning to be more self-aware in like every aspect of our lives, right? And that's like, it's not, you don't have to run a marathon tomorrow. Like it's just one step at a time. And that responsibility is just like, I just want to continue to grow, and rather than I'm just stagnant and don't want to look at anything. Then, even that subtle shift of like, I'm committed to growing, even if it's like, micro movements. If that's all you have the capacity for at that time, that's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. At least you are like moving forward. You're not staying in one place. Yeah.
And going back to something that you had mentioned before too, is about therapy and how like you're not jumping in both feet. It's you're kind of building this trust and stuff. I think that might be an important thing for people, and I'm curious to hear your response as well. But like with people who are resistant to it, like you said, the people who are coming to see you, the people who are going to therapy, like those are people who have made the decision that I want to work on this, I want to heal this. But there's a lot of people still that are out there that, they probably at some level do want to work on it. They probably at some level do want to not feel kind of their pains and their traumas and their shames and like all these emotions that they're just having trouble navigating. But I've heard it from a lot of people where they're like, I tried therapy, it doesn't work. Right? It's like, but like, how long did you try it for? Right? So I'm that's a roundabout way of asking, like, what's your message to people who are saying, like, yeah, therapy doesn't work, or I tried it and it didn't help, like it didn't fix things, like that type of language.
I think the number one thing about therapy that's so important is finding somebody you can work with, which I do understand is hard. It can be a feat. Like, you're trying multiple people and you're paying for sessions and then you're like, well, that sucked and that didn't go anywhere. That I didn't feel seen or I didn't feel heard. So like, I understand that in and of itself is a barrier to finding somebody that you like really do feel like you can connect with and that you feel safe with. But that is going to be the, like, again, research shows us, like, if you don't have a close, like that safe, close relationship, where you can go into all of these things with your therapist, it's pretty much like not going to be very beneficial. I mean, you could get some skill sets and things, like you could learn, skills of self-regulation or whatever it is, but to transform the emotion, you definitely need to have a relationship with your therapist where you feel safe and where you feel like they see you and hear you, or if they miss something, that it's safe enough to address. Like if they, totally missed you in some emotional experience that you were having, where you could bring that forward and they would be able to like make that emotional repair, because everything is like attachment. We're attached. We could go into a whole other session about attachment, but like we're relational beings, and everything that we experience is rooted in attachment. So we need a safe attachment figure in our life. Like, we need somebody that is a safe place for us to go. If we don't have that, then you're not going to really experience profound results. But then I also say to people, like, it's not like I'm sitting here like therapy is the best thing that ever happened to the world and everyone should go to therapy. I mean, obviously I'm an advocate, but I'm also an advocate to like meet people where they're at, and not everybody needs to sit with a therapist, but you got to do something. And so like it's just not doing nothing, right? So if that's like going to nature and like, taking your shoes off and grounding in the earth, and you can feel your body and you can feel your sensations and you're connected to yourself and you're connected to your breath and you meditate, and like that's how you work through emotion, and that's how you self-reflect and you journal and you exercise and you like, I mean, that might be how you work through emotion and sensation, and you reflect and you challenge yourself and all that stuff. You don't have to sit with a therapist. You just have to do something.
Yeah, it's the analogy that comes to mind for me is like diets, where it's like all these diets work. Like all these different diets, they work. Like if you're trying to lose weight, these diets will work. Every single one of them will work if you follow it, right? And it sounds very similar to what you're saying too. It's like therapy could work, this other form could work, this other thing could work too. It's like, what works for you and what can you do consistently to like build that, right? Because therapy is like a relationship. It is, right? You have to build that trust. And if you're going in and jumping in 2 feet kind of thing, it probably isn't even the best way for somebody to jump in. Like I imagine a lot of therapists would probably be like, whoa, let's like pump the brakes a little bit. Like, tell me about yourself first. Like, let's build this relationship so that we have a safe space, right?
And like, just, to share with the readers a little bit, like, I think a lot of people, my clients, people that know me, they're like, well, you just like have your shit together. I'm like, well, don't look at me like I think a lot of people like are like, well, it's easy for you to say, Katrina, because you have your shit together. And I think that, one, I don't always have my shit together. I still get angry. I still get anxious. I still like deal with my own stuff. I know how to regulate it. Like, I've definitely developed the capacity to like manage that significantly better. And like I've tried a lot of things. Like, I don't want to be sitting in the therapist chair preaching and people being like, well, it's easy for you to say because, you're in a privileged position or that.
Yeah.
So, I've done all kinds of things. Like, I have done like psilocybin. I've done breath work. I've done energy work. I've done acupuncture. I've done therapy. I've done, talk therapy versus somatic therapy. I've done all kinds of things and really like immersed myself into these things so that when people are talking to me, I have some awareness within myself of like how I've experienced it. I can like, one, connect with people on a different level of understanding, but I can also share, you know, like, well, this is where like something didn't align with me, and this is where something did align with me, and like we have to learn to trust ourselves of what's aligned with us, rather than, you know, a professional telling us this is the way, or this is like what's going to work for you. You got to learn that. But again, that's all part of the healing process, is like learning what works for you and like what is aligned for you. And so, you know, I definitely don't want to sit here and act like I have it all together. But I do know that I work very hard at, you know, working through all my shit that I've carried for my life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of my, like, it irks me when people say this. Like, I've had people say the same thing to me before, where I'm working with clients and stuff, and they're like, oh, I just wish I had my shit together like you do. Or like, it's almost like an insult, because you're like, I'm glad that I give the impression to you that I have it all together and stuff, but me even just being able to give that perception takes a lot of work. And it takes a lot of like consistent practice in different areas of my life and stuff like that, right? It sounds a lot like what you're saying too. It's like, yeah, I do have it together most of the time, but it's because I'm like doing this and this and this, and I've tried everything. And, you know, the reason why you're so good at what you do is because of your experience that you've had in your life. Like, you can't, it's like the difference between somebody who's textbook savvy and somebody who's like street savvy, right? It's like you almost always go to that person who's got that like street experience.
Well, and like, would you pay a personal trainer that was obese? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a big debate in the industry, right? Like, it's, again, could be another full episode, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, that immediate perception would be like, oh, I want to pay the person who's like jacked and has like big muscles and stuff like that, because they've clearly like gone through it and experienced that.
Yeah, and there's like a perception of like, oh, you've done this. Like, and I certainly don't want to ever have the perception of like, I haven't done it. I haven't done the work. I haven't walked the walk, you know, like I want to be in the mud and the muck as much as I can, so that I like, I get it.
But on the other side of it too, somebody, like, playing devil's advocate a little bit, somebody might look at somebody who's like a personal trainer, but they're maybe a little bit overweight, and they might go like, oh, that person gets it. They probably know what I'm going through. Like, they probably experienced that, which lays power to like what you were saying before, which is like, yeah, I also get angry. I also get anxious. Like, I'm also a human being who's experiencing human emotions and shame and all these types of things. So like, we're all kind of, I think that's where like, you're not alone. This expression of like, you're not alone can be really powerful. Is like, you know, it's like, we're all human. Like, we're all going through this together. Let's just like make each other stronger in that sense, and less judgment, right?
Sometimes like I wish that we could just like just lay it out all on the line, like, because I think we would all very quickly realize like we're not alone, and we all feel these things. Like, you know, it's like mind blowing to me, where I just sometimes wish I could just be like, to my clients, like, they're saying stuff to me, I'm like, yep. And I'm like, I was also laying in my bed crying this weekend, you know, like.
You're just like, I've been triggered 10 times in this session.
And it's just, I don't know, like,
I'm the same way. I have people, they're saying stuff, I'm like, I literally was dealing with that this morning.
Same.
Same.
Yeah. And
but
so
it just grows that experience, right? But yeah, that's another, like, the I'm not alone thing. Like, I've got like I've got competing thoughts on like the expression of I'm not alone, that type of thing. But I don't know if we get into that today or not, but
I'm curious now.
Well, okay, I'll just give you like the brief version of it, because I want to be respectful of your time today too. But I don't know, there's a part of me that thinks, when we hear people say like, well, you're not alone, like, everybody's experiences or other people's experiences. I don't feel like it diminishes my feelings, but for me, as somebody who like looks at like society as a whole and wanting to see the world be a better place, like, if I'm feeling depressed and everybody else is telling me, well, you're not the only one who feels that way. Everybody's experiencing this stuff. For me, I'm like, I'm more depressed now, because now I'm like, well, this isn't a nice world to live in then. It's almost like it goes like to like a really dark place sometimes for me. Whereas on the other hand, I'm like, I think we need to redefine what not alone means.
Well, and I think we just need to change the language. Like, I think it's like when it can feel dismissive if somebody's like, well, there's lots of people depressed. And you're like, well, great. Like, I feel very in my own head, and I do feel alone, and I feel like that doesn't help me at all. And there's a tone emotionally of feeling dismissed or not seen. But for somebody to like be like, hey, I'm right here with you. Like, I'm willing to like get in the hole, sit with you in it. You don't have to be perfect. Like, we'll explore the darkness together. Like, that to me is like a totally different emotional tone where it's like, I'm not trying to pull you out of the hole and be like, get out of the hole. I'm just like, I'm going to crawl into the hole with you and like, hopefully shine like maybe a glimmer of like light or hope with you so that eventually you like can come out of the hole. But, I think it's like getting into the hole with people, getting into the mud and the muck and being like, I got you here. Like, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I've been thinking too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I think we're using you're not alone as like this Band-Aid statement that's like, it makes people feel better. But I don't think it actually makes people feel better. I think it's like the action of like showing somebody that they're not alone is what's really needed. It's like now more than ever, right? It's like teaching people like how to be that safe space for other people so that when people are ready to be vulnerable, they have access to it in their life, right? Because a lot of people are not going and booking a therapy session. It's like, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this too, but I think a lot of people aren't just like, I should go to therapy, I'm going to look it up on Google and stuff. It's typically like they've had a friend that's like, they've then had that deep conversation with that's like, hey, just so you know, like, I go to therapy, maybe it's something that you might try. Like, I imagine that's where a lot of people decide to take that initial step. So it's like teaching the general public how to create more of that safe space and like showing people that they're not alone first so that they can feel comfortable that like, oh, maybe there are other people that will get in the mud with me.
Totally. Yeah. And this comes full circle to like knowing ourselves well, because if we want to be emotionally safe for people, we have to know emotion. Like we truly have to know it, because otherwise we're going to say something like, well, you're not alone, but we don't actually understand the like emotional tone of what was just said. But if we are feeling things with people and we're in an empathetic state, or we're like, we've gone through our own emotional stuff and we've felt our own things, we're going to understand the emotional tone significantly more of like, words do matter, and the way we convey message and the way that we like messages and the way we sit with people does emotionally matter. And that's how you can over time become more and more of a safe person, because you're conscious of tone, you're conscious of language, you're conscious of your energy, you're conscious of all the things that actually are the reasons that people don't feel emotionally safe. And we don't feel emotionally like held. The number one thing I see in couples therapy is like the husband that so desperately wants to like fix the problem, and the wife that's like, and it's not always this way, but it's a very common thing that I see. So I apologize if that puts people in the boxes, and the wife is like, I don't need you to fix it. I just want you to like be there for me. And it's like, that's one very common thing of like, just being able to be like, hey, like, let me hear you. I got like, vent to me. And then like, do you want me to help you come up with a solution, or do you want me to just like be with you in it? Yeah. And so then we become safer and safer by being able to be comfortable with our own emotion and our own being aware of our own stuff. Yeah.
And like everything, it's like so much easier said than done.
It's so much easier said than done.
But it takes real work. And I think the things that we've talked about today at least give people like a good starting point on like with all these emotions and, the heavy ones, the good ones, everything. Like, how do we start to kind of self-regulate a little bit? How do we reconnect with that? And I think you were able to give people a pretty good blueprint on like, okay, where do we start with our emotions, right? So thank you so much for that.
Of course, yeah.
And you've been so patient with me today, and so I don't want to keep you any longer, but is there anything else that you kind of wanted to get out to the people?
I don't think so. We hit a lot today. We hit a lot.
We learned a little bit about each other.
Yeah.
It's good. So I'm excited to keep learning more about you.
Yeah, you too.
And the 20 houses that you've lived in, or over 20 houses that you've lived in.
I'm calling you if I have to move again.
Yeah, definitely.
You can talk me through it on the show.
Well, I'll always help you carry some boxes or something.
Thanks.
I'm happy to. So.
No, next time I'm paying someone.
Yeah. No, that's what I said too.
I'm never doing it myself ever again.
Yeah, there's too many things that we accumulate.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for being here, and thanks to everybody else for listening.